Um, just wanted to first say thank you to everybody for being here, of course. This is now our discussion of Crip Camp, the documentary film. And you're here maybe because you're someone who's interested in disability issues. Maybe you're a person with a disability or a community activist. Maybe you're just interested in the film as a piece of narrative art, or maybe all or some of the above. So no matter what brought you here, we are just welcoming you to the conversation. We hope that if you're here in the room with us, that you've probably seen the movie Crip Camp at least once, whether you watched it with us just now or whether you watched it on your own. Either way, I think we're going to have a wonderful conversation because we're talking about some disability issues and topics that you don't have to have seen the movie to understand. We do hope that the film, you'll go back and watch the film if you haven't before, but that this discussion will enhance your understanding and your interest in disability and disability rights and accessibility. We welcome your participation in a number of different ways. When we had the movie going, we asked people to turn off their cameras and their microphones. But now that we're into the discussion, we welcome you to show us your faces. Again, keep yourself muted if you're not talking, but we actually are welcoming people to speak up. Use the raise hand button on your toolbar, or even just physically raise your hand. And we'll try to keep an eye out for people who are opting into the conversation. You can, of course, use the chat window as well. There's lots of ways to interact, and our panelists from the Council on Disability Awareness will actually be sort of taking turns leading different conversations, different topics. So this is hosted by the Council on Disability Awareness, by the School of Social Work at the University of Iowa, and also by Wild Bills. And I am Jen Knights. I work at School of Social Work doing marketing and community engagement. I manage Wild Bills, and I'm a member of CDA. So I'm have a number of different cookie jars that I'm pulling cookies out of tonight. So one more thing, if you notice on some of the participants' Zoom screens and their names, you'll see the word liaison after their name. These are people who are here to help. Yeah, thanks for waving, Patty. So if you have technical issues or something's not coming through, you can always direct message one of those folks, however you're most comfortable doing that. So thank you again for being here. And the first thing we're going to start with is a wonderful announcement and some great information about an event starring Judy Heumann here at the University of Iowa coming up. So Bree, would you mind jumping on and giving us that information?
Yes, hi. Thank you all for joining us. And I actually have to give a little backstory to this because Caleb Cook has joined us today. So I have to give a little shout out to Caleb Cook. I teach therapeutic recreation and child life at the University of Iowa, and part of our class in the spring was TR clientele. And as part of the class, students watched Crip Camp, and then we had a discussion based on Crip Camp. Well, we were learning via Zoom. And so we had a lot of guest speakers that were from all over the country that joined us. And after we watched Crip Camp, Caleb said, "Wouldn't it be awesome if Judy Heumann could come to our class?" And I was like, "Yes, that would be." I said, "But I think maybe it's a little bit bigger than coming to our class. So let's see what we can do." And so in collaboration with the UI lecture series and a whole host of community and UI partners, we've collaborated, and Judy Heumann is in fact coming to campus. She's actually supposed to be here tonight, but due to COVID, we've shifted this. And so, yeah, we get to celebrate. And so mark your calendars. We'll give you those final dates, but mark your calendars, March 28th through April 1st. Judy Heumann will be on campus here at the University of Iowa. She will be speaking at Hansher. And we will also be including, we're going to be collaborating with Film Scene as well. And Judy has written 2 books. She's written Being Human, as well as Rolling Warriors. So if you have not read those are also great resources. And she will be doing a book signing at Film Scene during that time as well. So we have lots of community opportunities, and we will be sure to share that information with everyone as well. And please let me know if you have any questions about that, and look forward to more information.
Thank you, Bree. We are super, super excited about all that. And actually, it's kind of great that it got moved to the spring because we have more time to build more partnerships and make sure that everybody in the world knows about it. So next, I just want to take a few minutes to let each of our panelists introduce themselves briefly. These are all people who are either part of the School of Social Work or part of the CDA. And we'll start with Amber. Do you want to, I'm just going to go in alphabetical order. So go ahead, Amber.
Sure, yeah, I can start. So I'm Amber Alanis. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm bicultural and a first-gen college student. Currently a doctoral student at the School of Social Work. And I'm also a member on the Olmsted Consumer Task Force. I'm super excited to be here, and I hope you all speak out about what you saw in the video.
Thank you, Amber. Next, Mike Honig.
Hi there. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
My name is Mike Honig. I am a program coordinator with the University of Iowa Center for Disabilities and Development. I've been very active in the Council on Disability Awareness over the years in one way or another, and I'm sort of a supporter, I guess, but follow it very closely, and I'm so excited to have such a good turnout here for the not only for the screening, but for the discussion, and we look forward to having a very open discussion over the next 50 minutes or so.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for being here. And Megan, go ahead.
Hi there, I'm Megan Meyer. I am a program administrator for the Graduate College. I administrate 2 PhD programs in biomedical science, that is neuroscience PhD and molecular medicine PhD. In my personal life, I am raising a child with a disability, form of muscular dystrophy, and she is a wheelchair user. And I also identify as a person with a disability. I have a hearing impairment. I am on the CDA because it's important to me to create a campus community and a world that is inclusive of this community and create more allies for this community.
Thank you, Megan. And finally, we have Michael Penneman. Michael, would you like to introduce yourself too?
Yeah, hello everyone. My name's Michael Penneman. I'm a member of the CDA and I identify as an individual with an acquired physical disability. I'm a quadriplegic from a spinal cord injury. I graduated last fall from the University of Iowa and I'm passionate about being involved in mentoring, educating, and working with individuals with disabilities, and was a LIN trainee this past 2020-21 year. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Michael. And I understand that we have some other LEN trainees here on the call. So thank you for joining us. I see some nodding heads there. Thank you. Megan, you want to go ahead and start our activity?
There we go. We are going to do a quick reflection exercise called a waterfall. So before we left for the quick break, we said to have some initial thoughts in mind that you might want to share. I'm going to put the instructions again in the chat. And what I'd like you to do is type into the chat, but don't hit enter yet. So I'll give you about 20 seconds, 30 seconds to type your initial impressions into the chat. And then on the count of 3, I want everybody to hit enter. And what we'll see then is a waterfall of everyone's impressions. And hopefully that will have a bit of an impact on us. And then I'll read a couple aloud. And if a few of you want to share out loud, please feel free to do so. So I'm going to give you about 20 seconds here to get to type in. All right, can I get a couple thumbs up that was enough time? Looks like it was. Okay, everybody on the count of 3, please hit enter. 1, 2, 3. All right, I'm reading a lot of empowerment, intersectionality. Yes, great point. Impactful. Is there anybody that wants to unmute themselves and share maybe what struck them most?
I see Nathan with the hand up. Do you want to speak, Nathan?
Sure. I'm hoping my internet has been a little wonky, so I'm hoping that it does. Can you hear me okay?
It's a little laggy, but I think you're coming through.
Okay, I just want to make sure. So one of the things that so I'm a LEN trainee, by the way, and currently in the PhD program for literacy, culture, and language education. Recently, I would say I joined LEN and got interested because a lot of the literature that exists does not address learning disabilities when we talk about general development in schools. But I wonder why it takes so much effort and so long for people to even just get attention or for action to be taken. And I would say, this is like a really big example at like a legislative level or national level. But I would say like, sometimes I think even like at the university level or smaller levels, I still get frustrated that I saw as someone who taught French that there were people that really needed resources and really needed to be acknowledged, but the hoops that they had to jump through in order to get the resources that they need, some of them just either, required testing that was too much money, so on and so forth. And I think this movie was motivating, to know that change can happen. But I think sometimes I get frustrated with how long it takes or how much change or how much attention it requires to even bring about questioning the current process that's going on.
Totally agree with you, Nathan. And I think we're seeing that in our society right now. And I'd like to think we're at the verge of the next disability revolution, that it is taking a long time, since the ADA in the 90s. That how can society and allies push for the next phase? But yes, totally agree with you.
And I wanted to add just one other quick thing too. I know, I think invisible disabilities, like intellectual disabilities or mental health, neurodivergent disabilities, those are just the hardest. I know personally, when you rely on medical diagnoses for invisible disabilities, it just sometimes just takes way too long for people to get resources for that. So I noticed like a lot of the people that were in the sit-in like had visible disabilities, but I'm hoping that, if there is another revolution, that some of these invisible ones also get equal attention as well.
I'm sure there were probably some invisible disabilities there as well. Just obviously they were invisible to us. But the diagnostic odyssey to get to a diagnosis is a real thing. Agree with you. I believe we have time for one more impression from this film. If anyone would like to share out loud.
For me, it was very inspiring in that, I didn't realize how hard the people with the disabilities back in the 70s had it. And it was just came as a very great shock to me that the people with the disabilities, how hard they had it and what they had to overcome. I'm just amazed by it.
Agree. I thought for 3 or 4 times throughout the film, gosh, we're the lucky ones to be able to witness all this footage that somebody caught back then, to be able to share and put into a documentary so we can see it now and be even more grateful. All right, Jen, I think we are on time for the next section. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, fantastic. And actually, we're going to start with some of our discussion topics that are a little more targeted. And Mike Honig has our first topic of discussion he's going to introduce. And again, we are really welcoming participation from everybody here. So feel free to jump in, raise your hand, or chat whenever you feel like saying something.
My screen reader is acting real goofy. Am I unmuted? Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Awesome.
And probably your camera angle looks good too.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. I moved. So, boy, I wish I could change the question now, but I will stick to script. I will say, to Nathan, to your comment about, see, it's always dangerous to give me a microphone, but I will say to your comment about the disability rights movement and the people that were in the sit-in and the Centers for Independent Living, that you had hit on a really important issue. I think that there has been really a struggle in many venues to incorporate people with invisible and also with neurodiverse needs, and also people with intellectual disabilities into kind of what's considered the disability rights movement. And I think that Lind is in a really great position to, and has already been making some changes in that area. And I'd love to chat with you about it further. But at any rate, the question that I'm supposed to ask, and I think I came up with it, so I guess I'd better ask it, is that I would like to get your impressions of the term Crip, especially after seeing and listening to the video. So interestingly enough, this morning I had to go through a medical procedure, and the young resident that I was talking to, he was asking about my work, and I was talking about being involved in the screening of Crip camp. And so he was just amazed at that term, Crip. So just a little bit of background: people oftentimes with a particular disability are comfortable with other people calling them that same word. I didn't hear it a lot in the video, but I know that blind people can be blinks, and Crip people can be, or people with physical disabilities oftentimes refer to themselves as Crips. And I know that I have deaf friends who call themselves deafies. But what about when it crosses a line and, it's used in general terms? So I would really, whether it's in the chat box or raising your hand, and I would like, Jen, if you would mind looking at the hand raise, or somebody, please.
No problem.
Sure people come on.
I do have, is it Raina with your hand raised?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say, because it's kind of funny, because when I first heard the name of the documentary, I was kind of like, oh, okay, like, what is this going to be about? But then, like, when Mike was just talking, it just made me think, like, I identify as pansexual, and, the community now uses the word queer, which, back then, again, is just kind of like one of those words that people are like, oh my gosh, like, but it's kind of just one of those things that the community has taken back and has used it, and they prefer, like, that's what they preferred. Like, I prefer the word queer. Like, I use that. I identify as queer. But when I first told my mom, she was like, you can't say that. And I was like, yeah, I can. So it's not so much, I guess, like, that's just kind of like what I immediately thought of when I saw it and heard it. And so, yeah.
Yeah, great connection there, Raina. I don't see any other hands raised. You can lower your hand if you want to, Raina, and then
I can chat a little bit about, I have a hearing impairment and wear 2 hearing aids. And I think even growing up, I would hear the term, are you deaf? And it was just children in passing, and it wasn't ever something that I took offense to. But now if somebody said that to me, maybe I'd feel differently now that I have a diagnosed hearing loss. And so, it's something that maybe was acceptable at one point in time. Doesn't mean that it's always acceptable, and you have to know your audience. And so I think we always need to keep that in mind and be tactful around those that we surround ourselves with.
I think, am I muted again, or am I unmuted?
You're good, Mike.
Good. Okay. I'm so sorry. So I think that's a very, very good point. Have to know who it is that you're using that term around, or those terms around. I saw a comment. This is very interesting discussion. Yeah. So somebody said, take back the term to empower our community. And Kate typed in that you were taught never to use that term, crippled. But this is, again, it's a slang that oftentimes is used within the disability community. Just as an example, if I had friends that I could call Crip, that within a disability coalition, or we had a guy with CP in that group that loved to call himself Super Spaz. And so that's what I called him. But I certainly would not do that. And so I think it's very contextual. So excellent comments in the chat. Any other comments or?
I think that Chris C, did you have your hand up a few minutes ago? Oh, Chris, you're muted. I'm sorry.
Jen, can you unmute Chris?
I can ask him to unmute. I cannot unmute him. There, he just needed a little button pushing. Hi, Chris.
Hello. I've been working on the board for the university for the let me start over. I first watched the movie you guys are talking about with one of my staff, and I got so much information from it. I'm on the way to writing a book about myself, and gonna put some of that stuff into my book that I'm writing.
Wow, you're writing a book. That's amazing.
But it is. I got 5 pages of it done already. But I want to interact in what people that want to be interact like into I know what Mike is saying. I feel the same way, but I feel the same way, but in a different way. You know, because you know downtown. You know downtown at the old Capitol Mall.
Mm-hmm.
I went to a whole bunch of people and got 5 extra minutes by
and Chris is trying to have a call right now. Try to keep it down.
And when people go through the door, the automatic door by CBS.
Yeah.
I was the one that got that for people.
Well, Chris, I think that's a really great accomplishment. And I think that, well, probably you're going to be including that in your book, right? That experience. Good. Yeah. And I have to say, as a writer myself, 5 pages in, that's a huge accomplishment. I have not gotten to 5 pages.
What? Michelle, I got a question for you. Michelle.
Well, are you wanting to ask a question to someone on the panel or someone else in the room?
No, I want to ask you a question after the.
Okay.
After.
Yeah, we can talk a little bit after the panel discussion if you'd like to. I can stay on for a few minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And actually, I think we are we're past time. And Amber, I know you've put some time into preparing. So unless my things have changed in the last day, my outline says that you're up. So are you still up?
Yes, it is me.
Thanks, Mike.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for passing it over.
And thanks, Chris.
Yeah, I actually know Chris, and I know the story she's speaking to. She advocated at the Old Cat Mall to get a door to be more accessible for people with disabilities. So super exciting. I am covering a couple questions. So one question, and if people don't feel inspired by that question to answer it, I have another. So Crip Camp shared the story of people advocating for the rights of people with disabilities as a civil rights movement. How do we still see the civil rights of people with disabilities being threatened or violated? And I really want to hear from you all. I have things to share. I took notes again, watching this movie like for the 3rd time. I always think I can learn something new. So Jackie. Oh, yeah, exactly, Jackie. Chris did advocate for that. I can put the question in the chat if that's helpful. But yeah, I want to hear from you all.
I had an experience that I can speak to, being a hearing impaired person. I was not diagnosed with a hearing impairment until I was 35. So all of my undergraduate degree I went through without complication that I knew of. But as a graduate student, I discovered very quickly that in some coursework, I was struggling with lecture material and found that closed captioning would be of benefit. And upon recognizing that, I had reached out to a professor, and they didn't have captioning. And so the initial recommendation was to kind of look at diagrams and pictures and then rely less on the lectures, which, the lectures are there for a reason. And everyone else was having access to the lectures. And it was an accommodation that was followed through upon. It wasn't that it wasn't followed through upon, but I think that that nobody had ever inquired about that. And I think initially, this person just didn't know what to say. They didn't know how to handle it. And so it all worked out in the end. But I think those are some examples of not everybody being informed or educated about the rights of people with disabilities. And those of us with disabilities can learn how to be advocates for ourselves in tactful ways and work together to improve those for the next people or the next person that comes along that might need accommodation.
Yeah, and those accommodations are for being hearing impaired or other accommodations, right? Diversity, there's so much diversity in disability. So many chats coming through. Does anybody want to speak to their chat? I'm going to read them, but...
Does everybody feel like they can read the chat easily? Should we call out, just sort of maybe read out some of the comments here?
Yeah, I was going through the marriage penalty. I'm really curious what you have to add about that, Flannery.
I mean, I don't know that I have a ton to add about that other than just I personally know people who can't marry their partners because they would lose their benefits or their partner would lose their benefits or they would both lose benefits. Mm-hmm. And so I think that marriage equality is something that we've kind of seen like there have been kind of multiple rights movements centered around marriage equality. And so seeing that that's still something that needs a lot of progress and a lot of work.
Yeah, and policy is what I'm hearing you speak to, particularly. There's some other barriers that sometimes get in the way too, but yeah, let's see.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to jump in really quick. I'm sorry. I was supposed to raise my hand. I forgot. Just something that stood out to me too is just that sometimes when you like reach a milestone or you some amazing thing happens, like legislation, like I think of like ADA, learning about that, how that must have been such an amazing moment, but then maybe losing the public's interest or like people thinking, okay, we got there, but like now there's less work that needs to be done, but actually like the work just needs to keep going. And so, yeah, I think that would be something that stands out to me is, oh, well, people think you should just be happy this happened. But yet there's more work to be done.
Yeah, like don't get stuck in the one thing we were advocating for. That those are exciting things, but there's still more work to do. That's what I'm hearing you say. Yeah. Thanks for sharing, Ashley. The unemployment rate of people with disabilities, Patty, would you like to speak to that? As I keep scrolling.
Oh, the unemployment rate for people without disabilities is what, under 10% right now, even after a pandemic. But people who want to work, people with disabilities who want to work, their unemployment rate is like over 70%. And it's just, it's because businesses are not willing to make those accommodations. And most of those accommodations take less than $500.
Yeah, I know it's astronomical.
So it goes to that education again of the general public. We need more people to know the needs and how easy it would be to employ a person with a disability, have them as a neighbor.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the quotes at the end that I heard was, unless we change society, that law won't mean much, right? So just that continual work. It's a long journey, I guess, but there have been small things along the way. I can pose the other question too. All these chats are exciting.
There's a hand raised.
Oh, is that a clap or a hand raise?
Oh,
okay. No worries. Thank you for telling me, Patty. Another question I have to pose is how did the film emphasize disability rights as human rights and civil rights? So what did you notice in that? I'll put that in the chat here too.
Maddie?
Yeah, I think this speaks to this. And as an SLP who's always a speech language pathologist who is always thinking about communication and access to communication, that is kind of what struck out just in general from this documentary the most to me, and the intentionality they had to all methods of communication and access to that as a human right and as a civil right. And I think just the intentionality that she wouldn't speak without an interpreter right next to her, and just taking that step at every opportunity that they had to further emphasize that communication is a right and should be accessible at all different places in society. That was one thing that stood out to me specifically, was the right to communication and the right to have access to communication. That was really powerful to me in the way that they were so intentional with it.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for highlighting that. I saw some folks highlighting what the Black Panther Party said. Does anybody want to speak to that before I pass it over? Okay, you don't have to. Now I'd like to welcome Michael Penneman to speak to his questions.
Thank you, Amber.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. I just posted my question in the chat box, and that is, how can we ensure that disability and issues that matter to people with disabilities have representation, whether that's politically, in the media, or elsewhere? I'll provide you with, my answer and see what everyone else thinks. But since Crip Camp began and with recent DEI movements, there's been big strides, but we still have a long ways to go. And three important things to me to ensure representation and create change is, first, we must acknowledge, understand, and embrace the widespread nature of disability. Disability touches every demographic category: gender, age, race, sexual orientation, and it impacts most people eventually through accident, illness, or aging. And 56 million Americans have a disability. And if you extend that to the family and caregivers, over 60% of Americans is part of the disability community. Some people have disabilities from birth, while others acquire them, like myself. Certain disabilities are obvious because they require use of a wheelchair or have noticeable physical attributes. However, most disabilities, including those related to learning, attention, mental health, chronic pain, are all invisible. And many people with invisible disabilities are still in the closet due to stigma. Secondly, make sure people with disabilities are part of the solution. People with disabilities are ready to contribute their lived experiences to problem solve and deserve a seat at the table, whether that's a seat in leadership or just throughout. And last and most important to me is become an advocate. Speak up. You have a voice that is more powerful than you know. Share your story or speak up when you or individuals with disabilities that you know are faced with challenges or issues, because you're not the first or last that will experience it, but your voice adds light to the issue and creates awareness to the problem. Your personal and shared stories bring home the issues for individuals that just don't understand. And a personal story conveys powerful images and facts that figures and statistics cannot. To really speak powerfully about an issue in a way that will move the listener. And these voices and stories should and can be heard by local, state, and national politicians to create permanent and lasting change. I mean, you saw the impact, understanding, and lasting change created from the voices and stories in Crip Camp. So with that, I'd like to open the floor and see what your thoughts are on how we can ensure that issues and individuals with disabilities have representation.
Yeah, I see that Mike Honick has his hand up. I don't know if you can see that on your screen, but Mike, you have something to say? You need to unmute yourself.
Okay. Did that do it?
Yeah.
All right. Jaws has an issue with this, but hopefully so I apologize for not always knowing and having to ask. But anyway, I think one of the important things about people with disabilities being at the table is that we really need to make sure that people have the support they need. I can still remember a long time ago, one time being asked to serve on some sort of a state a site visit for a new employment program that was starting in Iowa for people with disabilities. And so I got this phone call, and this guy said, well, are you, he said he wanted somebody to go to this meeting as a person with a disability. And I said, are you specifically asking me to represent? I mean, I had tons of stuff going on. I said, are you wanting just to have a person with a disability? And he said, I just need somebody with a disability there. And that can't work. It has to be intentional. And I think that, we as people with disabilities have interests that are disability related and some that are not disability related, and being able to participate in those kinds of groups. And then also to have support, whether it's transportation, whether it's someone to come and provide some support in terms of understanding what somebody is saying, sort of being a facilitator, making sure that a person has an interpreter, making sure that if there are 13 attachments for a meeting packet, which I have seen before, that we figure out a way to change that, so that chances are if a person with an intellectual disability is overwhelmed, so is everybody else. So I think it's trying to think outside the box to create a lot of universal design in how we present and how we host meetings, and just making sure that people have the barriers removed so that they can participate.
Absolutely, Mike. I couldn't agree more with the words that you just spoke. Thank you for your input. And looks like Kelsey, if you would like to share, you have something to say.
I do. I actually, Michael, I just wrote it in the chat, but I'll elaborate a little bit. So, being a person with a disability, I was born with it at birth. It's difficult at times, and I'm a self-advocate now, and so I advocate for a lot of things that I want, and it's important, because if you don't advocate, you don't get what you want. And a lot of those things, you wish everything was completely the same, just like everybody else, but you have to make a change if you want change. And it's important, being a person with a disability. One of the things that I just want to mention quickly is the marriage penalty. I have a partner, and we're in we're a committed partnership, and we're not able to legally marry due to both of us being on SSI and DI, because if we were going to legally marry, our benefits would be cut by a third or a half or something like that. But in order to keep our benefits, we have to keep things how they are, and it's tricky. And so just wanted to give my opinions, but a lot of it's in what I said. So yeah, everything, it certainly has been an emotional experience for me, watching the movie and just, sharing just everything. It's really eye-opening. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Kelsey, so much for sharing. And I know you're a big self-advocate, so.
Yeah, thanks.
Anyone else that wants to share?
Okay. So I guess finally we have Megan's going to come back. She kicked it off, and she's gonna close it down with the final discussion topic. Go ahead.
My maiden name started with a Z, so I'm used to being at the end. It's okay. I'm teasing. I just put into the chat what my question is that I'm going to lead, and that is, what is the next battle in the fight for disability rights? How can we contribute to the fight, either as persons with disabilities or allies to the disability community? So I will welcome your input. I'll just briefly give a few thoughts of my own on what's next from my perception for the disability community. I do have a bit of a bias in that a few of the things I will speak about are as a parent of a child with a physical disability and a mobility aid. But I do hear all of you that have been saying the marriage penalty, because yes, that's one of them I had on my list, and you guys got to it before I did. The unemployment for folks with disabilities. Yes, that is a barrier. We all need to help the rally and get to the community to take attention to and help us get past that. But the few that I will hit quickly are airline travel is not accessible for folks in a wheelchair. My daughter sitting next to me, sitting in her wheelchair, and she does everything in her chair. She cannot take it on an airplane. Instead, it has to get stowed below the plane, and then it risks getting broke severely. And it's a $26,000 wheelchair. We can't just go to Target when we get to our destination and purchase another $26,000 wheelchair. So personally, for the wheelchair users, it would be great to see the community and the allies push for accessible air travel. There's a barrier to find housing that is accessible for low-income folks. So if there's a barrier to get married, there's a barrier to find jobs, and then there's a barrier to housing, you can quickly see why the disability community lives in poverty. It's not right. And then something that we encountered in our diagnostic odyssey of 3.5 years to get her to diagnosis is that it's a bureaucratic maze to access supports for people with disabilities. If you don't know the right terminology, you don't understand what step you need to take 1, 2, 3 to even get to 4, you're not going to access the items. We were finally lucky enough to get a family navigator, and then I ended up with a job as a family navigator in CDD to help folks just like us. But that bureaucratic maze just needs to be more simple. So that's from my neck of the woods. What feedback and thoughts do you guys have about what's next in the battle for disability rights? Universal health, yes. Yes, Jen. Anybody else? I saw lots of nodding heads, so I'm sure some of you have a comment.
Is Chris raising her hand again? I can't tell for sure. Yeah, okay, Chris, you need to unmute yourself then too, please. Or yeah. Anyone else have something to say in the meantime?
Unmute, Chris.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Chris.
I did a long time ago call the Social Security people and asked them if at the time
I'll take care of it.
Somebody wanted to get married, so I took it on myself to call the Social Security place, and all they said just your benefits will be together instead of apart. And that also goes with that one person that was talking with that knows me from downtown. I can't think of her name right now, but that also ties into her her question about what if people with disabilities have tried to get married, because it's really hard to even get the courage to call somebody like Social Security. It took me like 2 weeks to finally tell myself I'm gonna call them and figure this out, just because I was curious anyway.
Yeah, you're right, Chris. Advocating for ourselves does take a lot of courage and a lot of
I actually talked to somebody from the Social Security office, and he said, I can't remember if it was a lady or a guy that I talked to, but they said that even if you're wanting to get married, all the money will go together. All the money, like for SSI, would multiply instead of just being one person. The money would multiply for the two people.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, we hear you, and we totally agree that it takes a lot of courage, and sometimes hearing what we hear, it's not what we want. And we're all working to advocate with and against that. Jackie, it looks like you have your hand up. Would you like to share a thought? Unmute yourself, Jackie, please.
Sorry about that. I'm sorry to scare you all with my picture here, but I just feel like I need to add a face to this when I'm talking. I just been thinking throughout all of this, and the question was, what can we do as people with disabilities and those that don't have them? What can you do for the community? And just kind of it reiterated my thought when Chris was talking. And as a person with Tourette syndrome, I advocate a lot for my son that had severe and profound disabilities, and that came very natural to me, but it never came natural to me to advocate for myself. And I think a lot because I didn't know what it was till I was 22 and I was already an adult. So I'm still not super comfortable sticking up for myself when I get made fun of or mimicked, but I have had some friends that have done that for me. And I was just thinking about during this walking out of Lindell Mall one time, and I didn't see the two girls make fun of me, but which is rare because I'm hyper vigilant to see kind of everything, and but my friend Mary did. And before I knew it, she had spun around and followed these two women into Regis hairstyling to tell them that was rude and that I had Tourette's and whatever. And it meant so much to me. They had on like Regis shirts or whatever and stuff. And then when they didn't take her seriously, then she asked to talk to the manager. And it just, for her to go out of her way like that means so much to me. And I think all of us, should charge ourselves with, when you see things like that happening and stuff, or even someone saying a flippant comment about, whatever, just in my own experience, Tourette's or, being a punchline or whatever it is, and people with disabilities being discriminated no matter what, or just flat out ignored when they need help or something. I just challenge y'all to say that's not okay. And I've got a friend, Jackie, you can use my name, who has this when you see the or. I took this class, and you can be very respectful about it. In fact, I think that would speak even louder and kind of put a little shame where it needs to be, maybe instead of on the person with a disability, but the person who has a problem with it. So just in culmination of everything that we've been talking about and stuff, I think, we obviously need a lot of changes going on, but us as individuals can just speak up more, not just the people with disabilities, the ones who don't have it, but see it and hear it and don't say anything, but be respectful. And anyway, that's just my thoughts. When Chris was talking, I was having a problem with my credit card this morning or whatever, that I had seen something flagged. And my husband years ago said, because of my Tourette's, and I jerked the phone away from my face when I'm talking. I don't mean to, but then someone's saying, oh, I think we have a bad connection, and they hang up, and then I have to start all over. So he said, would you like me to make the calls for you? And then I have to give him permission. But it caused me so much anxiety for so many years. And then to have somebody just take that burden away for me was such a blessing. So possibly, other people can just say, I never really thought about this, disability doesn't bother me at all, but is there any way I could help? Even something like that is huge for me. So thanks for listening.
Absolutely, Jackie. I think you said it very well. And that is speak up and become an ally by speaking up and helping. And that's one of the points I was going to end with, is just become an ally, and let's get strong in numbers. Let's educate ourselves to learn more about people with disabilities and the barriers they face, so we can speak up more and advocate and challenge the implicit bias that people have towards folks with disabilities, or people seeking employment that might have a disability. So that brings us to about time to wrap up. And I think Jen is going to close us out here. And thanks, everybody. We really appreciate you participating and hanging with us this long.
Thank you. Thank you, Megan. Again, thank you everyone so much for being such enthusiastic and meaningful participants in this conversation. We are so happy that we are going to get the opportunity to meet Judy Heumann here at the University of Iowa this coming spring. So again, mark down March 28th through April 1st. She's going to be doing a talk at Hancher, film scene movie showing. She's going to be interacting with schools around. So just keep an eye on the websites or Facebook pages, etc., for either School of Social Work, Wild Bills, Council on Disability Awareness. We'll make sure and share all that information as soon as we have details available. But just know that you are actually going to possibly get a chance to meet and see Judy Heumann in person. So thank you so much again for all your advocacy. CDA is also open to anybody at the university who wants to participate on the council. So reach out to anybody who's here on the screen. It's just, our website is cda.org/cda.org.uiowa.edu, or you can just search for Council on Disability Awareness. And we welcome anyone to join us. So if we don't have any final questions, I think we are going to end exactly right on time. Okay. Well, thanks everyone, to the panelists and the attendees. So good to have you.